Hi everyone, how are you?
Hi.
Nice to
So
see you
nice,
both.
yeah, so nice to see your faces.
You're in Australia right now, right?
Yes, I just moved back a few weeks ago and did a 2-week stint in a hotel for quarantine, and now finally in my apartment. But the upside is that we can go into bars. I don't mean to rub it into your faces.
Well, that's more than we can do, as you know.
I didn't do a 2-week lockdown in a hotel for that.
Absolutely. I also got my hair cut, don't mean to rub it in.
We're all wishing our lives away to May and June when we can do the same.
Oh, it's good. Not long now.
Yeah, nearly there.
Fingers crossed the government stick to it.
Absolutely. Right, I'm just going to share my screen and then we can get started. So bear with me. I have not been the most tech savvy today. Right, can everyone see my screen okay?
Yeah.
That's perfect. Take it away, Georgia.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining today's webinar. With the full fashion shows concluding in Paris, we'll be talking about how retailers can use AI and data to merchandise next season's biggest trends. I'm delighted to introduce my colleagues who will be sharing their expertise of what's next in fashion. Today we have Tian-Mei with us, a retail strategist who works on our customer success team, and also Kayla, our market analyst who's behind some of the incredible reports and blogs that we publish on Edited. And to quickly introduce myself, my name's Georgia, and I'm an account manager on the customer success team. Tian-Mei and I have been working firsthand with retailers to support them with navigating themselves throughout this challenging trading period. We'll be discussing more about our roles and how Edited can empower retailers to embrace data to enhance their commercial and strategic decision-making later in the presentation. For those who are not so familiar with Edited, we're a market intelligence platform where retailers can gain access to real-time market data, trend analysis, and research at the simple touch of a button. Having access to this data enables retailers and brands to make faster, data-backed decisions and better understand the competition within the global market, whether that's through product colors, trends and patterns, or price point, discount, and communication strategies. First of all, a quick mention for our mobile app. This is available for our Edited customers. It puts world-class retail insights into the palm of your hand. You can see the entire back catalogue of our amazing retail and runway reports, and you don't need to miss a thing as you can check in on the latest reports whilst on the commute into work for those of you who are starting to head back into the office. Or if, like me, you're still working from home, you can have a quick look at the latest reports in bed with your morning coffee. Free resource we have available to all is the Edited COVID-19 retail dashboard. It tracks key metrics that highlight the retail industry's response to the variation in demand caused by the worldwide pandemic. We're live tracking the most heavily affected countries for key metrics like newness and discounting, as well as the top performing categories. For today's agenda, we've put our expertise together to discuss the strongest runway trends, including some quick wins and insights from Edited's market intelligence platform to break down what's working commercially across shapes, colors, patterns, fabrics and themes to help guide retailers on digital planning and preparing for fall 2021 and beyond. We'll start with exploring the role of the runway today and where trend inspiration comes from. Then we will move on to how retail market intelligence can improve retail processes and monitoring of trends, enabling retailers to be more reactive. We'll then take a deep dive into some of the standout themes seen on the recent runway shows that are applicable for both men and women's wear, with examples of how data can monitor these successes and incorporate these trends into future ranges. Finally, we'll examine two polarizing themes, loungewear and occasionwear, examining their presence on the runway and answering the question we think all retailers want to know, is comfort dressing finally over? So let's get started. I'll hand over to Kayla, who's going to run through the presentation.
Thank you so much, Georgia. I'm really excited to talk to both of you today. So we're going to kick off with a bit of context around the importance of runway today. This kind of new normal of the digital runway format continued over the previous seasons due to the pandemic. amongst buyers, merchandisers, and designers. The runway is still one of the first points of inspiration when designing and planning out new lines. Although the catwalk, as we know it, has evolved in recent seasons, and new channels such as TikTok have become incubators for the aesthetics that are resonating with the Gen Z consumer, we know the traditional runway circuit still serves as the birthplace of the majority of trends that are then interpreted by fast fashion brands. So these trends feed directly into what goes into production, which is why we'll spend some time today covering how market intelligence can optimize your decision-making for new regions. Before we do that, I will address this question to Tian-Mei. I know that on the customer success team, you guys work with so many retailers globally, from luxury to mass market. In this new day and age, what are the platforms and avenues that they're using to identify the latest trends these days?
Yeah, well, I think what we've kind of learned from lockdown is that trends are now not only just coming from the runway, but because we're all inside, because we're all consuming content, it's coming directly from the Netflix and like Amazon Prime shows that we're watching. So if we see kind of the Regency core styles from Bridgerton, or the preppy styles from Queen's Gambit, as well as the kind of re-emergence of 90s sitcoms like Friends, it's not just from the runway now, it's coming from all over and all of the content that we consume in our homes.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is so many great shows right now. And I simply just cannot keep up. And that is such a good point. And we will be touching on some trends that have come from specific Netflix shows or content like that, and then have been fueled by those influencers later. In addition to the runway evolving, the roles of fashion professionals have changed as well to become more digitized. You know, we have all come from a retail background, and we know that even before COVID, there were just so many tasks that were so manual, so time consuming. We're very grateful we don't do them anymore. And this is particularly cumbersome, especially if you're working in an industry like fast fashion that purely relies on your business being so reactive. Now there is still this reliance on digital and data, and it's even more important. We're all still working from home. It's harder to get out and visit stores and comp shop to compare prices and products, and it still will be for some time. As well as a lot of international travel is halted, your buying trips are paused, and then therefore a lot of the runway shows have then gone digital, or designers have opted not to show at all. And then this is where we start to see designers embracing different processes such as digital showrooms.
Yeah, and it's really also important to note that it's actually not just the brands themselves, but we have a lot of customers who are suppliers, and digital showrooms, especially high quality digital showrooms, are so important to their business so that they can present to the brands, to the retailers, the exact quality of the products that they're showing. So we've really seen a kind of resurgence or an emergence of interest in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a great point. So of course, with everybody going digital and embracing digital, the importance of edited really is to help retailers. And in this section, we're going to be diving in a bit deeper to our roles, talking about how we're supporting these retailers during challenging times and how we're reinventing retail processes for the better. So because the theme of this presentation is on runway, we will start here. Traditionally during this time, after the shows have presented, is when buyers and designers will spend countless hours poring over collections to identify the most successful trends to adapt to their assortments. At Edited, we do the hard work for you. Our in-house analyst team will review every look from the runway and then apply their knowledge of what's working commercially for shapes, colors, patterns, and more across your core categories. So then you know the winners to back without leaving home. In addition to these runway reports, the analyst team, which I'm a part of, also leverages edited data alongside retail knowledge to build reports for our in-app users. So these include guides for weekly meetings, as well as specific trend and culture reports on any topical pop culture moments or any trends that have come from viral Netflix shows. As you mentioned before, Tian-Mei, these are so important. As you mentioned, styles are being born and trends are being born, not just from the runway season. And then retailers have access to this report and this hard data to help them become more reactive and capitalize on this particular trend. We also cover reports on sustainability, diversity and inclusion, all of which are such important topics within the fashion industry. So some things we'll look at is how retailers are adopting environmentally friendly fabrics or processes, as well as insights into size inclusive markets, as well as highlight BIPOC owned brands and influencers to follow. And then the CS team, which is Tian-Mei and Georgia. So their mission is really to enable the edited customer to make better decisions and maximize the value that they get from our data. Using this, they can then pinpoint or help retailers pinpoint what their competitors are buying into in terms of trends and when they're bringing them in. They can also assist with analysis of which products are selling well for retailers and which are not, looking at them through the lens of color, pattern and price. Georgia, you can probably talk a bit better to some of the tasks and some of the processes that the customer success team undertake.
Yeah, absolutely. So following COVID and in the wake of the pandemic, as it's still having such an enormous knock-on effect for the retail industry, we've seen such an enormous uptake of edited across buying offices and retail offices, sometimes in departments that we haven't usually had such high levels of integration with. Particularly over the past few weeks, we've been working a lot with design teams where they're beginning to combine insights from our retail and runway reports, which Kayla has talked us through, along with the market analytics to identify key silhouettes, prints and colours, and then combining that with that market analytics data to see which retailers have these items now and how they're performing in the wider market. So they're really starting to combine the data with the creativity and instinct of the designers at the very beginning of the product life cycle. So they're able to create commercially balanced collections from the offset and really keeping the consumer in mind.
Yeah, that's great. And it perfectly leads into the next section where we're going to be diving into some of these tools and how they're applied to merchandising runway trends. So starting with how Edited uses AI to decode color. So we use image recognition software to detect the color of every product available online. So retailers then have full visibility of the worldwide breakdown of hues. Businesses can see what shades their competitors are investing in right now, down to the specific color code. So the inner wheel shows the major color family, so your greens, your pinks, your blues, and then you can see it broken off into the outer wheel into specific shades. So then that's when you get your baby pink or your olive green. So this is a really granular way that retailers can back the right trends, take the guesswork out of their palette distribution, because they can then layer this filter with some other charts and tools within Edited to understand, as you mentioned, what's working well, what's not working well, what might require a markdown or so on. Can either of you share an example of this feature being used or how retailers have adopted it?
Yeah, we always get such positive feedback from our partners about the colour talks. It's such a quick way to see what's going on across the market and such a trend-driven area. Last year, one of the retailers that we've been working closely with actually used the colour wheel to readdress the shades that they offered within their skin tone lingerie assortment. They'd realised that it was biased towards people with lighter skin. So by viewing the market and seeing who was doing this well, they were able to identify where opportunity lay, and as such, able to develop and launch a new inclusive colour spectrum of skin tone lingerie, not laundry, across all categories. And this is now extended to their shapewear and hosiery, having additionally started with bras and pants. And it's enabled them to cater to a much more diverse customer base, which is fantastic.
Yeah, that's such a great example. And again, backing up the importance of this, not just for trends, but also for everyday items and your essentials, such as underwear and hosiery, which has been very long overdue for that kind of overhaul.
Definitely.
So looking into the runway, we've applied the edited color wheels to break down the core trends for the women's fall 2021 shows and compared this with the past 2 years so we can see how shades have evolved. Automatically, what you can see is tones starting to lighten up.
There's a lot more white and neutral included on the runway than in the past 2 years. We've seen greens lighten up as well. Previously, they were darker, maybe a bit more khaki. And also pinks and purples are kind of unseasonably prominent this fall than they have been. So, usually this season we associate it with darker colors and your dual tones. And while these were still very much of note, we can really start to see this shift into something lighter and brighter come through. And I think that is an effect of 2020, a response to that, how we're starting to now see happy dressing replace pandemic dressing. And we'll go into that in a bit more detail, how some of the trends that have formed have caused this shift into more joyous dressing. Breaking this down further, so within our edited reports, we can separate the color trends into these 3 tiers. So you've got your core colors. These are your base trends. They are colors that are well established, have continued for a number of seasons, so they're your safe bets. For fall 2021, this is chocolate brown. They were huge last season and a very strong autumnal hue. And then you've got your whites and neutrals to add to that minimalist aesthetic, which was noted on the runway at Paul Smith and Victoria Beckham. Next, you'll see the commercial tones. So they're your must-haves for the season, your cash cow products. So you'll find dark greens, royal blues, hot red, magenta, Cylon yellow respond to that happy dressing theme, and you'll see it within Occasionwear that's starting to bubble up, as well as 80s dressing influences. These will also be applied to oversized silhouettes, head to toe tonal dressing as per the Balmain head to toe pink look on the right. And then at last, you've got your directional, more trend forward colors. So this will be for your higher ticket items, products that you won't be backing too heavily, won't have a lot of SKUs behind, more to be for, press or for viral attention. So here's where we'll see pastels, lavender and mint green, especially within the Regency core trend. And then bright citrus again for that happy dressing aesthetic, also applied to high shine materials and lounge quartz. So leaving colors, let's dive into some of our major themes on the runway, and we'll be looking at monitoring their success with retail data and calling out key ways to invest. So we're going to be starting with the preppy trend. Of course, a trend that has been gaining momentum from the pre-fall shows, and it's continued to be fueled by pop culture moments such as Emily in Paris, the Harry Styles Treat People with Kindness music video, and then the upcoming reboots of these nostalgic shows that everybody loves, like Gossip Girl and Sex and the City. Again, why TV shows are so important for trend inspiration. This is a super safe trend to invest in, as it does have so much reach. There are ways that it can be merchandised to appeal to your Gen Z consumer, as well as that more mid and mature shopper. So what did this look like on the runway, and what are the key investments? So starting with menswear, we can see it took on more of a sporty aesthetic. It merged with athleisure to create this subgenre of prep leisure. This was executed through collegiate graphics, sporty stripes, and bold primary colors. We saw the varsity jacket as a key shape alongside sweater vests, which are already performing really well and should already be in retailers' assortments for fall. And also straight leg trousers paired with color block trainers or high top trainers, as well as high socks and beanies for major footwear and accessories to complement the story. The major fabrications to look out for are cable knit cottons, leather, quilted nylons, denim, cotton jerseys, and lightweight wools. For women's wear, we saw plenty of nods to cult films and television references, resurrecting 90s and noughties trends, such as Clueless-esque miniskirts in plaids, berets and loafers as well. There was also some horse girl and off-duty royal influences that were characterized by riding boots, headscarves, and quilted outerwear. Varsity-inspired prints resonated here as well. We can see that at Philosophy di Lorenzo, which is at the bottom right. And there were also iterations of houndstooth and argyle prints, as well as loads of luxe fabrics to top it off. So here is where you can introduce your wools, boucles, corduroy, and velvet. So moving into the data portion of unpacking this trend, so how to merchandise the preppy theme. Similar to the color wheel that we went through, edited technology can identify the difference between patterns. So we can understand, what is a spot, what is a stripe, what is a camo print, and then retailers can use this methodology to understand how to apply a print for maximum success. This chart here shows a snippet of our assortment tool data, which we've broken down by checked arrivals for fall 2020 versus what sold out in this print at full price. So what we can see for menswear and womenswear is investment was placed within shirts and jackets, and this is where there were sellouts too. However, following that, there were some nuances. Retailers invested this print in ties for men when it performed more successfully in sweatpants, which were the third best-selling category for this particular pattern. Obviously, this was due to loungewear's huge year and not too many people buying formal accessories. For women's wear, skirts were more successful than trousers, and this is a trend we can expect to continue for fall 2021, given how much backing of the mini skirt and pleated skirts that we saw on the runway. So retailers will then have their information that they've seen on runway shows, as well as hard data from previous years, to really make airtight decisions of the kinds of silhouettes that they're going to invest in, and it will really give them a leg up over their competition with upcoming assortment planning.
This trend really plays into core silhouettes and products that a lot of retailers already have within their collections. And by combining that market analytics and looking at the historical data, as you've done here, Kayla, combined with that runway reporting, it's the perfect example of how edited can be used to enable retailers to build options within these top performing categories and even reinvigorate some of their core lines that they might already have within the business. I know for a lot of our customers, so many products were put on hold last spring. So there could be opportunity with this spring, within this trend, to revisit those styles and identify which ones could be bought in now and re-merchandise with some of those newer accessories to give them that new lease of life.
Yeah, that's a great example. Thank you, Georgia. Moving on to the next trend, which is bundled up, aka duvet dressing, aka doona dressing, if you are in Australia like I am right now. So this trend lends itself to staying warm and cozy, and there's definitely an element of comfort dressing, which is what has made it so important. Of course, comfort dressing is on every retailer's radar. It's also really important following a year in lockdown. Everyone will be wanting to be outdoors regardless of what the weather is. We also have winter sports expected to be an increased area of focus when ski season starts up again and resorts start to reopen. And this trend also lends itself really nicely to alpine dressing, or that après ski look, which was noted on the Paris shows, and then in the viral House of Gucci photo on Lady Gaga's Instagram with Adam Driver in the top right. We're also seeing puffy jackets becoming now synonymous with streetwear, which is still so influential. And then there's a lot of examples of this item within hyped collaborations, such as the Gucci and North Face collection. So dissecting what this looks like on the runway for menswear. So the silhouette is very oversized, very enveloping and draping. Of course, we have the puffer jacket where quilted styles were key. It was styled layered over knits with relaxed trousers. And here we also saw a lot of jumpers made from luxurious materials like cashmere and merino. Fleece, which had a huge year, had a hugely successful year last year, has continued. We're seeing that teddy bear material and fleece matching sets, with the accessories to coordinate. In footwear, there are slipper style boots as well as trainers with Velcro fastenings. So this is a really good example of a trend where retailers can invest in the details if they're not looking to incorporate these big ticket items like an enormous puffer or high quality wool. So they can convey this look with functional and kind of luxurious trims. So things like belts on coats or shawl collars, as well as oversized pockets and piped hems. For women's wear, we saw models were swaddled in quilted coats, fur-like textures and cozy capes, Loads of layering here, blanket scarves and mittens, which can work as an entry buy into this trend. Mittens is something that we know had a bit of a bubble up success after the viral Bernie Sanders mittens meme, and they're going to continue for fall. Footwear was super chunky and functional, yet we're still seeing a lot of those lug sole boots and rubberized footwear that were big last fall. And we're also starting to see moon boot shapes and balaclavas as a bit more directional buy. So that's a nod again to that ski bunny aesthetic. Details, again, a lot of functionality with pockets and hoods, and then a bit of luxe styling with fuzzy trims. So this is a very wintry trend, and that can sometimes make products within it harder to merchandise and get phasing right as seasonality continues to blur. We know retailers are not dropping all of their swimwear at the height of summer, or they're waiting until the dead of winter to launch their coats. And getting the right product at the right time is a huge challenge, as you don't want to go in too early and risk dropping products while your competitors are in sales mode, or then go in too late and miss the window for a trend. So here is where market intelligence can solve this problem. Using data lets you see when new products are dropping over time and when they're selling out. And that enables retailers to gauge competitors' patterns to ensure they're not behind on delivering products. So this is an example of Edited's history tool, looking at last year's new arrival for puffer jackets, which are obviously a core component of the bundled up trend. And it shows their weekly arrivals on the blue line versus when they were selling out at full price on the purple line. And what we're seeing here is an example of consumers' textbook see now, buy now mentality, where as soon as something new starts to arrive, this is when they want it. And this is where we have the largest spike in sellouts for puffer jackets. And that happens in the last week of August. This is then followed by consistent sellouts for the rest of the year, indicating their success continued to carry on. This doesn't mean that retailers should, switch up all their orders and bring in all their puffer jackets in August while it's still warm. However, paired with their own data of what works well, they can then start to make more informed decisions on how they're phasing these traditionally seasonal products. So they're making the maximum return on investment. So maybe this is when you can make some tweaks to bring in your more directional items, products that you want to go viral, maybe ones that you have a lot of marketing behind to generate some hype early before the cold weather starts to kick in.
Yeah, and this is also a really good opportunity to combine our visual merchandising tool in the Edited platform and our history tool, so that not only can you see it through the history tool when the product's being brought in, but in the visual merchandising tool, see when the retailers are talking specifically about the products and whether this actually aligns with these product launches. So are the retailers communicating about winter coats at the same time that they're actually dropping it, or are they starting to communicate about them a time before? So it's really interesting to see kind of and learn from the different retailers when and how they're planning their new strategies.
Absolutely. I actually have a great example of a fashion retailer who was viewing historical swimwear sales and phasing in exactly the way that you've done here, Kayla. So using the history tool and combining that with VM to see when people were speaking about the products. And they actually identified that some of their key competitors had never out of stock, so seamless season swimwear in winter and Christmas time, as well as spring, summer. So this enabled them to take that data to their senior managers and ultimately bring forward their swimwear launch collections to January, whereas they were previously bringing it in April. So it opened up that 4-month selling window, which, as we know, we've all come from retail backgrounds, that's such a massive win to get 4 months additional trade. So it's a really valuable example of how people can be using the data.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. So helpful there. We've got a winter and a summer example.
Yeah.
So the final trend that we'll place under our microscope is another example of fashion's continued obsession with nostalgia. We'll be going back to examine 1970s trends here. So this is an important era in fashion, as of course it draws parallels with today as a period of civil unrest and people becoming more involved in social and political justice, especially at a younger generation. There's also some optimism in this trend as it taps into the desire to escape and transcend modern day challenges and provides an outlet for consumers to play dress ups. 70s style is often synonymous with the festival season, and though 2021 we will miss out again on Coachella and Glasgow, so far we have Lollapalooza, Leeds and Reading slated to continue at this stage. So that's a really good period to set up this 70s trend ahead of winter arrivals to then follow in the later months. Of course, the nostalgic appeal to this trend is also what makes it so successful, as there's aspects of it that will really resonate with generations who have and have not experienced this era. As we go into the core items, this trend is really interesting to examine, as you'll start to see it's more of a directional trend for men, yet a super commercial one for women. So here we go for men. As you can see here, the flare has made a huge impression, another trend propelled by Harry Styles. To refresh 70s for this particular decade, you can look to an earth tone color palette and livened up with some of those bright directional hues like citrus yellows and greens. This is another story where the sweater vest can be merchandised into, so it has a dual appeal there. An easy way to evoke this era is through prints. So you've got your paisley, geometrics, monogramming, block stripes, and vintage graphics. All of these had presence within the menswear shows. And then there's accessories and footwear, which are so crucial to this trend and is a great way to introduce it gently into assortments. So through velvet slippers, pointed toe boots, wool scarves, and beaded chains. For women's wear, 70s was an overarching theme at Anna Sui, Isabel Marant, Erdem, Prada, and so many more. References of note included, again, earth tones. We see the mini silhouette cropping up again, bohemian midi dresses and flares. For footwear and accessories, you've of course got your platform shoes, clogs, and then a lot of croc or snake textures throughout handbags and belts. Print again is important here. However, for women's wear, patterns are a bit more out there than for men. We've already started to see those optical and psychedelic prints sell within the mass market. So their presence on the catwalk just further adds to longevity and kind of gives retailers a hint not to start marking them down yet. So looking into merchandising the 70s style with our data, of course, getting prices right is one of the biggest challenges that retailers will face. And that's something that is really hard to nail, especially with any new styles that haven't yet launched in your business and you have no prior data on. So we're going to use a core 70s fall style as an example, which is suede outerwear. And this is a great example of how granular edited can get by examining the prices of such a specific product. What we're looking at here is the core price points of styles dropping in the market last fall versus the most successful price points selling out without a discount within the US market. In menswear, 89 to 90 was the most invested price bracket. We also saw the highest number of sellouts within these intervals as well. However, then the majority of styles were found within a lower price bracket. So retailers were investing in jackets between $40 and $50. Yet where we were seeing the second most successful sellouts for price points was higher at $110 to $120. So this is an example of where retailers could have pushed harder into these higher price brackets, which appeared to be more successful. So consider introducing better quality or eco-friendly fabrics that can command a higher price and consumers will be willing to pay more for. For women's wear, we have a different story. Lower prices appear to be more successful, with the $40 to $50 bracket as the top performing prices, and retailers operated predominantly within the $89 to $90 bracket. Elevated price points at $90 to $100 were the second most successful price bracket, while the second most invested price bracket of $60 to $70 was the third best-selling price point. So businesses need to embrace data instead of just blindly sacrificing margins to be more competitive with their pricing. By using Edited, this is a great example where retailers can understand the way each region or sector of the market merchandises a product at a category level, or you can look at it by a brand level, and really highlights opportunities to plan smarter, which I'm sure Tian-Mei, you work with a lot of global retailers worldwide. You must have some great insight into pricing strategies.
Yeah, definitely. And we actually had a Eastern European customer who wanted to check their pricing in other Eastern European countries and checking that it was aligned. So they were expanding more into regions like Russia, and Edited was so helpful there because they were able to look at their current pricing versus the other retailers in the market, and they were able to actually understand that they were underpricing their products compared to the other retailers, and so we're able to then change their prices and essentially make more profit. So it's just so good to be constantly benchmarking yourself in terms of pricing amongst the competitors, whether it be for product or for region.
Yeah, absolutely. And I imagine that it's something that is so quick to do compared to how you usually compare prices. I remember when I first started in retail doing it manually, where you go onto a website and find something.
Yeah, counting them up.
Yes. In your little spreadsheet. Yeah, that is such a great example and a really great use case for edited pricing. So the final section of our presentation, maybe quite a controversial topic, covers the presence of loungewear versus occasionwear on the runway, how more formal styles are shaping up and performing in retail compared to casual wear. So this is something, of course, all retailers need to be aware of as they start to build on their assortments to move away from the loungewear-laden looks of 2020. I guess I think before we go in, is anyone like pro loungewear post lockdown? How are we feeling? Or is everyone just so excited to put on a dress and heels?
I would say I'm mixed. I think I'm pro loungewear, but not in the truest sense of it. But there are elements of the lockdown way of life and lockdown dressing that I think will be with me forever, whether that's an elasticated waistband or just adding jewelry to a casual outfit and calling it an outfit.
Yeah, I'm not going to stand up and show you the trousers. Tian-Mei, what about you?
I would say that I'm probably like it can be end of the spectrum in terms of I love occasion dressing. I mean, my whole wardrobe is basically just fancy dresses and they've just gone untouched. So I cannot wait to walk out and dress up. I hate how I've kind of relied on my free tracksuit bottoms, but I'm looking forward to being forced to dress nicely. So yeah, the lockdown end can't come soon enough.
I can't wait to see photos on Instagram of everyone's first day back in the office.
A lot of pressure.
Yeah, a lot of pressure. So let's take a look in more detail.
So loungewear has obviously been so important for several seasons now, and even pre-pandemic dress codes were becoming more casual as people were already working from home. Many regions, UK, are still experiencing lockdown, and many will continue to work from home even after vaccines roll out. Loungewear also lends itself to these evergreen aesthetics such as sportswear and streetwear, and they were present in some of the current trends that we just walked through, like preppy and bundled up. However, there is pent-up demand from people like Tian-Mei for occasion wear and party wear. During the height of the pandemic, we saw designers really use their collections to convey this sense of escapism. And now we're finally starting to see this become a reality in fashion as there's so much inspiration for better days ahead. So we're going to take a look at how these two polarizing trends were executed on the catwalks and how they will shape future buys. So at the menswear shows, occasion wear wasn't as prominent as we will see it for women's wear, and where there was suiting, it was still very loose and very relaxed tailoring. We can see the two blended together here. So, while for women, when we look at that slide, you'll see that they are two very distinct trends. For menswear, instead of this full swing back into formal dressing, the catwalk has showcased sort of new suiting loungewear hybrid with comfortable and oversized silhouettes, knitted blazers, loose trousers, comfort fabrics. So this minimal yet elevated look. And then for women's wear, such a complete contrast. Occasion and party wear were so apparent, and we saw this through bright and bold colors as well as metallics. There were a lot of 80s influences through sequins, mini cocktail dresses, big voluminous sleeves. The sexy dressing that were cropped up last spring was also apparent, and this applied to dressier garments through cutout details and sheer fabrics. Despite Occasionwear taking center stage for the women's wear shows, there were still aspects of loungewear, and they were, woven into collections. We saw them again in these complementing prominent themes like sexy dressing and bundled up and preppy. The major loungewear trends that we'll see include stirrup leggings. These were spotted on the runway as a very directional bottoms update, something that I'm sure the hyper fashion brands will be all over. And then designers such as Fendi were really fine-tuning pajama dressing with silk sets, while knitted, ribbed, and minimalist lounge sets were spotted at the Salvador Ferragamo show, as well as Tiger of Sweden. So now we've seen what the divide is between formal and casualization in terms of looks on the runway. We can consult our data to see what retailers are currently investing in versus what's working to get an early market read on these fall trends within the mass market. So this graph is our assortment chart, and it's showing new arrival of menswear products across the US and UK over the past 3 months versus what is selling out. This is a really quick and useful analysis tool for retailers to get an understanding of what competitors are dropping and what is actually working, and then you can adjust your assortment accordingly to ensure you're catering to consumer demand and not oversaturating the market. This is a top level view, but as we've showcased with our data, you can actually dive deeper and see what's working by a retailer or a subcategory level. We've highlighted some categories that are more on the occasion or formal side, so anything you'd wear out of the house or to an event or to the office. I think the first major call out, which is really interesting, is over the past 3 months, retailers are heavily investing in shirts, which were 14% of new arrivals. Yet if we look at the sellouts chart, demand has not fully returned. This category only makes up 8% of sellouts. We're seeing interest in trousers. Sellouts and new arrivals are more closely aligned than shirts are, so retailers aren't over-investing as much. However, jeans haven't seen much of a recovery just yet. They were 5% of new arrivals and 3% of sellouts. Demand is starting to pick up for shoes, and that includes loafers, brogues, Oxfords, any kind of formal styles. So that's good news for retailers stocking those. However, of course, sellouts aren't at the same level as sneakers, which we will touch on later. And then finally, there is still very minimal investment and sellout activity in these more formal outerwear categories, such as blazers, suit jackets, and trench coats. So then this is looking at the more casual and lounge styles for men. And I think it's no surprise to anyone, t-shirts are the most successful style and the products that retailers are dropping the most newness in. Moving on to the hoodies, which we've highlighted in the orange. We saw on the previous slide, retailers were backing more shirts. However, hoodies are outselling shirts and demand is outpacing arrivals. Sweatpants and sweatshirts are showing similar statistics. They make up 6% of new menswear products are sweatpants, and they're 8% of sellouts, while sweatshirts are 5% of arrivals and 6% of sellouts. Sneakers are continuing to thrive. They're 9% of arrivals and 12% of sellouts, so demand clearly isn't going anywhere. And while retailers aren't dropping as many puffer jackets as they're gearing up for spring, we're seeing this item continue to sell. We spoke through this on the previous slide. It had a major winter, and now we've seen it incorporated in the runway as a core element for the bundles up trend. So this is hard evidence that it is successful at any time of the year, and it's going to be super successful for fall 2021. Finally, the last point to call out here is that slippers are 1% of arrivals, yet 2% of sellouts. So another indication that cozy categories are selling and working quite well. So really this chart is showing us that while retailers are starting to trickle in more dressier items, for menswear, there is still that demand for comfort and more casual products. So moving to women's wear, retailers are continuing to land dresses in their spring-summer collections. They are 22% of new arrivals and 19% of sellouts. So demand hasn't returned to its full capacity, but it's more closely aligned than what we saw earlier for men's shirting. There is a similar trend, however, for women's blouses. They are 6% of arrivals, but only 4% of sellouts. Where we're seeing signs of optimism is within trousers. They are 7% of arrivals and 7% of sellouts. and jeans as well, 6% of arrivals, 6% of sellouts. So while it's not a whole lot of products entering the market compared to other categories, sellout activity is steady, and it's an especially bright spot now, especially for denim buyers or those who are backing this particular fabric or specializing in it. Shoes, which include pumps, courts, loafers, and so on, they're 6% of arrivals and 9% of sellouts. And then same for menswear, very little interest in formal categories. For outerwear, your blazers and your trench coats. Looking at the more comfort and casual products shows some similarity to menswear. T-shirts are again the top selling and top invested categories. However, arrivals are outpacing demand. So this category is 25% of new arrivals, yet 21% of sellouts. So retailers can take this data to make more informed decisions for their tops distribution. Maybe instead of adding another colorway to your t-shirts, you could potentially invest in a new option for hoodies, as this category, similar to menswear, makes up a greater proportion of sellouts versus arrivals, showing that there is demand there. Sneakers are obviously continuing to perform, 7% of new arrivals and 10% of sellouts. So there is room in this market. And slippers, 1% of arrivals and 3% of sellouts. So still some interest here. What I find the most interesting stat here is when we look at sweatpants sellouts compared to jeans. So on the menswear slide, we saw sweatpants eclipsing jeans in both arrivals and sellouts. Here at womenswear, we can see it's the other way around. Jeans are making up a higher proportion of retailers' new arrivals than sweatpants and a higher proportion of items selling out. Though it's not by a lot, jeans are 6% of total sellouts and sweatpants are 5%. It's just a really good insight to see this shift finally starting to happen after this mammoth year that loungewear has had, and we're all in sweatpants, that interest in denim is starting to pick up. It also indicates with dresses picking up that momentum that this customer is preparing, as we all said that we are, to wear something else outside of our typical pandemic uniform. We also know menswear trends don't move as quickly as women's wear. And we've already seen office attire and suiting in this era become more casualized. So while loungewear is still an important trend and is still performing for both men and women's wear, it's really the menswear retailers and consumers who are more responsive to it. And armed with what we know from the runways, we can expect it to continue to be ingrained within our future ranges.
Absolutely, Kayla. And on the topic of denim, we've been working with a number of accounts who've been looking at how to reposition their denim assortment after a really tough 2020, where it was all about loungewear and denim was in pretty much every sale that every single retailer had. I know that I did buy some jeans last year. But we worked with one account very recently who has been using edited top mover insights along with the top word filter in order to measure the year-on-year comparisons of the top words that were working in denim. So even there, it was evident that there's been a real shift towards more relaxed and comfortable silhouettes, with straight leg and oversized being some of the top words, which is really in tune with that nostalgic 90s and preppy trends that we've already spoken about today, but also comfort stretch is making a resurgence as well. So it's just another indication of how, where there has been that casualization, as you say, with the introduction of loungewear and people being more home-based. Jeans are still a manageable hybrid between that loungewear and casual wear, and a great way of updating spring wardrobes.
For sure.
Yeah, and just to highlight, there's so many difficulties, and I definitely worked with a lot of customers, especially last year around October, November, December. I know people had put in so much effort before in planning their holiday wear collections, but now because of all the lockdown, they weren't really sure what they should do, whether they should drop it or whether there was still demand for it. So they used edited, and especially combined with VM to see what people were talking about and whether or not they should be, pushing their holiday occasion wear products or not.
Yeah, it is. It's one of the most challenging times that we've had to face. So making it even more important to have this additional support there.
Yeah, definitely.
Continuing on with, comfort trends. In this slide, we're examining some women's footwear stats in detail. So looking at slipper sellouts over the past year in comparison to heeled sandals or heeled pump/courts, heels in general. And what we can clearly see is the impact of the pandemic with the huge boost of slipper sellouts versus what we saw seeing for heels right now. Demand would only just be starting to pick up. Slippers over the past year experienced an 82% increase versus heels, which is not even a 1% increase. However, this isn't the only way that Edited can gauge the success of a product. We can also analyze the level of discounts being taken. And we can do this in two different ways. So we look at the proportion, which is the percentage of a range that is discounted, and then the average discount depth applied. So currently only 25% of slippers across the US and UK are advertised with a reduction, and the average discount is 32%. So that's still quite low. High heels, on the other hand, have a bit more of an aggressive markdown applied. So 45% of heels are on sale and the average markdown is 43%. So this is a really easy way for retailers to gain insight into how a category or a particular trend is performing. And then it's something that they can continue to keep monitoring.
Yeah, and I found, especially because I work with a lot of footwear customers, how difficult the lockdown has been, especially. So we've got a US customer whose primary customer is kind of the mid to mature female market. But of course, of all the people, of all the age ranges in the US, it is the mid and mature age range that isn't going out the most because they need to be the most protective. So it's thinking, well, how can they change the collection, which is mostly outdoor walking sandals and outdoor walking boots, to a more indoor shoe. So it's really crucial to rely on Edited to shape their collection.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is the last slide from me, and we'll finally wrap it up here. So we were discussing at the beginning of this section the fate of loungewear, and now here we have some data to answer that kind of question, which I'm sure all retailers want to know. Is loungewear over yet? According to our data, not yet, and here is why. First of all, not just us, there are loads of external stats that forecast the growth of this market as well as sleepwear. So then there's some hard evidence that comfort dressing will stick around for a few years. We're also seeing arrivals grow, especially within menswear. As mentioned, this is where the demand is coming from. Year-on-year arrivals grew in t-shirts, hoodies, sweatshirts, sweatpants, and leggings, each of these categories, and then with a combined growth of 34%. Sellouts also grew by women's wear 9% and menswear 64%, again indicating where the demand is. And retailers are still promoting loungewear. Mentions of these items and iterations of and mentions of comfort grew 213% compared to a year ago. So retailers are still pushing out this message within their emails to consumers. And then finally, as previously mentioned, this trend has continued to weave itself within other key aesthetics and themes noted on the runway. You know, it lends itself to the preppy trend, it lends itself to bundled up, to the menswear hybrid suiting. So it will still, whether it looks like how it does now, we can expect to see that it will be elevated and it will continue.
Thanks, Kayla. So just to wrap up everything that we've covered today, we know that the runway is still one of the most important vessels for trend inspiration now. However, in the current climate, retailers need to be as reactive as possible and monitor what's going on across the new and emerging digital platforms that are available. And so as the industry and roles continue to evolve, retailers also need to adopt digital processes, making sure that they move with the times and be equipped with the right tools to optimize their processes so that they can save time and minimize risk within their collections. Core trends from the fall 2021 runways transcending men's and women's fashion are rooted mostly in nostalgia and comfort. And so in short, preppy, bundled up and 1970s influences are included in your upcoming assortments. And whilst Occasionwear and partywear dominated the womenswear runway, the men's shows were more comfort driven. So more formal styles are slated to make a comeback as restrictions lift. However, loungewear is still performing and will be a core trend within the fall 2021 ranges. And during this challenging era of retail, it has never been more important to have market data and insights at your fingertips, which allows you and your brand to pivot quickly and react quickly to the ever-changing retail environment. So if you can leverage editors' real-time data, and it allows retailers to understand how to mitigate risk, expand into and take advantage of white space opportunities. So informing future strategies aligned to your business objectives. So if you want more of these trend resources, edited customers have access to all of our runway reports from the men's and women's wear show. And you should stay tuned shortly for our coverage of Seoul Fashion Week. And then available to everyone on our edited.com blog, you can read up our roundup of the fall 2021 women's wear shows, which is powered by all of the data. And also very excitingly, coming up on the Unedited podcast, we're delighted to be interviewing Nell Diamond, who's the founder and CEO of Hill House Home, and inventor of the viral nap dress. So thank you all so much for listening. And if you have any questions, just send us an email at hello@edited.com.
Thank you. Bye, girls.